In this video, we're going to look at printing, inkjet printing, specifically to a Canon ProGraph 1000. Regardless of whether you're printing from Photoshop or Lightroom, the first thing you want to do is run a nozzle check on that printer. It'll save you time, especially if you're printing on expensive media. It'll save you time and money, and you won't be as frustrated. So at any rate, to begin that, the print check on the nozzle check on a Canon ProGraph 1000 is controlled actually on the printer. So this isn't something you run through software. This is something you manually do on the printer. So this is a screenshot right here that we're looking of our photograph of the LCD or LED LCD readout on the Canon printer. To start with, you actually need to load a sheet of paper, and we recommend that you just use regular, just inexpensive plain paper. You need to load a single sheet of that into the top of the Canon printer. Obviously, the printer has to be turned on. Power needs to be on. You load a sheet of that into the top, and automatically this screen will pop up, and actually the paper registration setting, which you'll see right here, will actually be selected automatically. If for some reason it isn't selected automatically for you, hit the home button right here, which will bring up the screen that we're looking at right here, and then use the up and down arrows here to actually navigate down. And you would actually click on this thing that says, in the case of this one right here, A2 stands for paper size, and then this photo paper Pro Luster is the type of paper. This is what we need to actually register the type that we're going to use. So again, you would use the arrow keys, navigate down to this, press the OK button, and it will take you to a screen that looks like this. In this place right here, you can actually change the different paper sizes that you are working with. So in most cases, whatever, this will actually open up automatically registered for what you have. If not, you would need to do page size here. A4 is a European size. Again, in the US, we would use letter size. And then the paper type, again, would actually be plain paper here. And then simply click on the registration button, and that will actually set up it'll let the printer know the type of paper and the size of it that you're actually going to print. Once you do that, click again on the home button to return to the main screen, and then you're going to actually use the arrow keys again to navigate down to maintenance. And when you then, again, when the highlight bar goes around maintenance, click the OK button. It will actually take you to this screen, and it will actually look like this. So you'll come down, you'll click on the OK button to hit maintenance, and it will open up this screen right here. So in this screen, the first thing that we can do is actually print a nozzle check. And again, you want to do this before you actually start printing. So every single time when you go in, do a nozzle check. So at any rate, again, this will actually automatically be selected because it's the top item. Press the OK button again, and it will actually print a nozzle check for you. So in the nozzle check print, what will happen is that you will get this. So this is actually a legitimate scan of a nozzle check that was done. And what you're specifically looking for are gaps. So you can see up in here, there's sort of like this mesh screen right here. There's a little break right in here. There's another break in this one right here. There's another break going up in here in this one. They can be anywhere on here, so it doesn't necessarily have to be in these particular colors. You'll see there's another series of breaks right down here. There's another skip right here. If you get any of these, you actually need to clean the nozzles of the printer. If, on the other hand, you get this over here on this side over here, you'll see that this is a nozzle check this is a sample of a nozzle check that is perfectly fine, in which case this would indicate that you're ready to go. So the next screen that you will actually get after you go through your nozzle check, after it goes through, it runs the printout, whatever here, you're going to actually get this screen. Again, this is on the LCD that's on the top of the Canon printer, and it's going to ask you which of these you actually got. Now, if you have the perfect screen right here, the perfect printout, all the meshes look perfect, there's no gaps or errors or anything like that, then you would simply click on this All A. That will take you to a next screen. That will actually take you out of it. It'll indicate that you're ready to actually print and that everything was fine. If, on the other hand, you have any of these anomalies in here, any of these blank skips or any of that kind of stuff, whatever, you would select also B. Again, this is giving you an indication of what those sort of the breaks in the mesh and the pattern net looks like. That will take you to this next screen, and it will say your nozzles are clogged. Do you want to start cleaning? In which case you would hit yes. That will take you to this screen, back to the maintenance screen right here, and offer, again, this will already be pre-selected. If it's not, simply use the arrow buttons up and down to select print head cleaning. Again, once this is highlighted, you would press the OK button, and that will actually take you to the next screen, which gives you three options. There is cleaning, there is deep cleaning, and then there is system cleaning. These are all sort of, they're variations on a theme. Cleaning is the fastest, and it uses the least amount of ink, and it's what you should try first. As a matter of fact, the manual itself from Canon says, run the cleaning first, run another print check. If it's still problematic, run a second cleaning, this first version first, before you go to the next level. And the next level would be deep cleaning. So if you run 2 rounds of this, and you're still having those gaps show up in your nozzle check, then you go to a deep cleaning. Again, a deep cleaning will use significantly more ink, so you don't want to do this if you don't have to do this. And then finally, after doing 2 rounds of deep cleaning, if you are still getting gaps, then you would go to system cleaning. System cleaning is pretty radical. So in most cases, I would say 90% of the cases, whatever, this initial cleaning will be just fine. So again, you'll select this using the arrow keys, hit the OK button, and it will then run you through a series. It'll run through a series of cleaning the heads on that. It takes anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes to do, so it's actually it's pretty time intensive. It's not very quick. However, once this is actually completed, it'll run through the whole series again. Then you want to go back and do your nozzle check again. So again, we would come up and print nozzle check pattern on that, go back to maintenance, use your home screen to go back, print another nozzle check right here, and again, you continue to do this until you get a screen that's got all of the meshes on here are not showing any gaps here at all. So that's actually to get through the sort of the nozzle check part of this. And again, regardless of what you're printing out of, you should actually run this part. So now, all right, so this is how we actually print an image out of Lightroom. So first things first, I'm actually in the library module right here. The only thing I've done to this image is it's actually been white balance. So obviously before you print on this, if you're printing from here, all the work that you would want to actually do in Lightroom, I'm going to click on the develop module here, and again, if you wanted to, I simply reset the white balance on this, but if you wanted to, again, obviously control the exposure, open things up a little bit, or whatever you want, ultimately get the image so it's actually ready to print. Now, in my case on this, I do not like 35mm format. I would actually crop this image for my portfolio. I would crop it for a lot of reasons, but certainly for my portfolio, I would crop it. At any rate, to crop on this image, I just want to make sure everybody understands that part. We're going to click on this icon right here. It brings up a series of crop marks right here, and you can see that they're simply sitting around the entire image, and you can click and drag these in custom ways, or so that it crops the way you want. For me, I prefer a very specific aspect ratio. Again, I like a 6:4:5. That's the aspect ratio I like my work to be in. So to do that, we need to actually unlock this, and then in our drop-down menu here from original, you can see that there are variations of different possible crops here. And you can also enter your own custom one. So that's what I'm going to do. It'll bring this up. So in my aspect ratio here, I'm going to put in, again, I don't like to put, even though this will take decimals, a lot of the programs I work in will not. So I'm more interested in actually working in whole numbers. So I'm going to do 45 by 60. And that's the same thing as a 4.5 by 6. And I'm going to go ahead and then say OK to this. And you'll see that the image has actually been cropped here. So we are, the cropping is showing here. Again, I can move the cropping around. I could lower it down so it's closer to the top of her head or raise it up, whatever. But this is fine for me. I'm actually happy with this part. So I'm going to go ahead and say done. So my image is actually ready to go now. So again, you've got to do all the work first, the exposure, all the image is ready to print. And then finally, come over here and click on print. So when I click on print over here, I'm going to do this as a single print. I'm not going to do any of these. So up here at the very top, we're going to start on this left side over here in layout and style. We're going to start at the very top and then work our way down. So we start here at single image contact sheet. That's the one that you actually want to pick. You do want to click on this, rotate to fit. It keeps us from having to deal with this later on. So again, the software will understand how your paper is being fed into this, and it will rotate it to fit accordingly. Then as we continue down here, in the print job panel right here, this was where we need to begin. So you can pretty much ignore the layout and guides. All of this work we've actually already done in our setup here. So in the print job, this drop-down menu here, you need to make sure that print to is selected to printer, not to JPEG. Then in print resolution, we are going to control the print resolution. You basically have 3 that you can choose from, or the 3 that I would suggest. You can do a 240 pixels per inch, and again, this is resolution of your print. You can do, anyway, you can do 240, that would be the lowest I would actually go in this, 300 pixels per inch, or 360. For me, the most common one that I use, and I use it all the time, whatever, is this 300 pixels per inch. So that's actually where I would, that's what the number that I would type in here. You can see you can type in different values here, but I'm going to type in 300. Then this is one of the reasons I don't like actually printing out of Lightroom, is that in terms of doing the sharpening, you have very little control on this. Basically, you get a low, standard, or high. Again, the only way that you'll ever know if these work or if they're the correct setting is to actually do a print out of this. But then again, the minute you actually enable print sharpening in this drop-down menu right here, you have got glossy or matte. So you have to pick one or the other. The reason that we are wanting to do print sharpening is that when ink hits paper, the paper acts like a sponge, and there is a small amount of bleed. When the ink actually hits the paper, it will slightly spread out. And so to combat that, what we do is we actually introduce output sharpening here. That's what this is. And this output sharpening actually over sharpens your print slightly so that when the ink hits the piece of paper and spreads out, which softens the image, the two cancel each other out. That's what this is all about. Again, the only way you will ever know if this has worked or not is you've got to do a print. There's no way to pre-visualize this stuff. There's no way to see this stuff on screen. It's simply, there's no way to do that. You do not need to bother with 16-bit output there. This is not a 16-bit output printer. As we continue to come down here, again, we've got options here in color management. So in the color management part right here, we need to change this from managed by printer down to the actual print paper that we are using. This is now going to be the ICC profile. Now you'll see here in this case, I've actually got an ICC profile that matches the paper that I'm using. Again, I'm going to be using a photo paper Pro Luster. However, there's a couple of other profiles here, but if you don't see the paper that you're using or the paper profile that you're interested in doing, you need to come to this other right here. And when you do that, a screen will actually open up, and these are all the profiles that are loaded on my computer. Now these are for different printers. This 2880 is an Epson printer. There's a Brother printer down here. This is the Canon printers right here. These are the ones that we're actually using. The things that actually show up in that drop-down menu that are sort of like there permanently are the ones that we simply hit check marks on right here. So this is how you would actually add something. So for instance, right now this Canon Pro matte paper is not one of the options that I've got. I can click on it right here and say okay, and you'll see that it actually loads it right here. But then in this drop-down menu, again, if I want that to always show up, so I'm going to get rid of it really quickly and then come back, and you'll see Actually, it is. It's still here, right here. So I'm going to go into other really quickly and we'll take a look. I think it's just dropped a check mark in next to it. It has. So this check mark, if they're here, these are the ones that show up in your drop-down menu. You can always uncheck this and then it won't come in your menu. It won't be in your menu as well. So I am going to go back to my photo paper Pro Luster. This is the one that I actually do want to use in this. So again, I'm going to click on this drop down menu and pick that ICC profile. So now what it's saying is that the profile is that the color management again is going to be handled by Lightroom, not by the printer itself. I have two options for my rendering intent here. Again, what rendering intent basically is trying to deal with is, what it's involved with is saturated colors. So if you have an image that is highly saturated, you actually would want to pick perceptual. What perceptual will do is it will bring those highly saturated colors into gamut, which means it will make them printable. However, in order to do that, it changes all of the colors of your image. Now, it changes them all in relationship to each other, so your color will appear to be the same to you. However, it will any of the really super saturated information that is in your file will actually be you'll be able to print it. However, it involves changing all the colors of your image. Now, again, it's difficult to notice, but nonetheless, that's the downside to it. If you have a relatively unsaturated image, like this image right here, has very little. There's very little places in here. There's nothing in here that's really a deeply saturated color. In that case, if you select relative, then instead of it in this case, anything that would be slightly out of gamut, it pulls in right to the very edge so that it would be printed, but all of the color that is in gamut remains absolutely unchanged. So this is a more faithful rendition of the color that you've actually got. So again, these two simply depend on how saturated your image is. If it's highly saturated, use perceptual. If it's not highly saturated, use relative, and you'll be good to go. This again is not a place to enable any sort of adjusting here. This is not where we want to actually do any of that. If your image needs more brightness or contrast, you actually need to do that in the develop module, not here in the printing module. So now you would think that you're ready to go, but you're not. So our next move is off of this set of dialogues on the right-hand side over here to page setup. This is the place, the next thing that you hit. This is where you determine the size of your the paper that you're actually printing out on. So I'm going to click on this drop-down menu. I am going to do mine on US letter. However, you should know that there's also a way, if you're doing a custom size piece of paper, that you can actually manage custom sizes here as well. We can create a setup for or a page size setting for custom sizes. So to do that, come to Manage Custom Sizes. A dialog box will actually open up and you would simply click on the plus. It'll actually give you a thing that says Untitled. Double click on that so that we can name this, and I'm going to call this, I'll do this as some weird paper size. I'm going to do this a 17 by 19. So that's just the way I'm going to name it, 17x19. And then in order to actually go ahead and put in those values, you simply would come up here to paper size 17 by 19. And then these are margins that are in by default. And this is actually coming from the last thing that I printed in here. These are the margins really used for a standard Epson printer. To populate this with the margins that you would, the standard margins for your Canon printer, you simply use this drop-down menu. You click on this, come down to, and again, you pick your printer type right here. We're going to pick that, and you'll see that those margins all change. These are now the margins that are needed by this printer. So anyway, that would be how you would actually create a custom size, and then simply say OK to that, and you'll see it's sitting right here. However, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back to my US letter because that's the way I wanted to actually print this thing out. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK on this. And so now this is actually ready to set up to print on this. Now, the next thing we need to do is actually set up the printer. So you would think you would go to printer settings right here. You do not. You come over all the way to the other side over to printer over here and you click on this. This is where you actually set up your printer to actually do the output on this. This is going to be the final step in this. So again, first things first, at the very top, we need to make sure that you select your printer. Now, in my case, you'll notice that I've got three different, this is a Canon Pro 1000 series, another one Series 2, and another one Series 3. All this is that as time has gone on, Canon has updated its print driver. So this is the oldest of them, this is the newest of them. So this is, now in most cases, you will not see this. This is just the way I've named my drivers here. In most cases, you'll simply see this Canon Pro 1000 series, and that's what you would pick. But in my case, I want to make sure I've selected the most recent one, current one here. So this part is ready to go. You will notice that there is no way to set a page size, the piece of paper that you want. There's no US letter here. There's no any of that kind of stuff here. All of that was set up when we did this printer setup step. That's why you do the printer setup step before you get to this stage of the game right here. So the next thing I'm going to change again is in my layout, my drop-down layer right here. I'm going to click on color matching, and you'll notice that these are now grayed out. And the reason they are grayed out is because I have said I want Photoshop to actually do the color management part of this. This is Adobe software, Lightroom. This software that we're in right now, even though it's cloaked in an Apple interface envelope, this is actually Canon software that we're dealing with right here. So so I've told Photoshop that it is that I want Lightroom. I've told the software that I want Lightroom to manage the color. That's passed this information on to this Canon software, and that's why you can't change anything in here. So I'm going to click on this drop-down menu, and the next thing you need to do is come down to Quality and Media. In Quality and Media, in this drop-down menu here, you need to, again, pick the paper that you are actually printing on. So remember, we set it up over in here. In this, we were actually doing the Photo Pro Luster paper. You need to select that again right here. So it is the Photo Paper Pro Luster. Again, this is going to be a top feed. So this is the feed that actually goes into this printer. There's two of them. There's one that sits on the very top. You can see, and then there's a manual feed. The top feed is pretty much all your standard glossy, semi-gloss, luster, those papers, whatever. The manual feed is for heavier weight paper, stuff that will not really curl, stuff that you want to pass straight through a printer, not something that's going to curl around a roller. So the manual feed is what you would probably use for much heavier fine art paper. So when you get into the really thick, serious fine art papers, that's when you would probably use the manual feed in the back of the printer. But in our case, this Photo Pro Luster paper is actually going to be fine to go in the top feed. The print quality in our drop-down menu right now, you'll see that we have a standard, high, and highest. All of this has to do, this is not going to increase resolution. None of this doesn't impact resolution. Resolution was actually set up over here where we actually said print resolution, and it's that 300 ppi. What this is actually DPI, dots per inch, and what it has to do with is how small the ink dots that the printer puts out are. The smaller the dot, the more nuanced color that you can actually get. Because the way a typical printer emulates color is by having very small dots of different amounts of either, cyan, magenta, yellow. Those small dots give the illusion of different colors. They give the illusion of colors other than your standard CMYK. What this has to do with is it's simply saying that as I start to go from standard to high, I'm saying I want the dot of ink to be smaller. The smaller the dot, the more nuanced the color. So you can go from standard to high to highest. It's, in my opinion, really difficult to see the difference in high and highest. You should know that if you do go to highest, the time it takes to actually make the print is considerably longer. So the smaller the dot, the longer it takes to actually do the print. So for me, a good compromise is high, and that's what I'm actually going to pick for this image. This is a color image. We will look at advanced black and white in just a little bit, but at this stage of the game, I'm going to leave that off. And then at this point, you would simply click on print. And I take that back. One other thing I wanted to look at really quickly. After quality and media, come down to paper detailed settings. There's a couple things that we need to actually check in here. If you are getting page strikes, and we're going to take a look at those, or head strikes, we're going to take a look at those in just a second, what they really are. They're marks that are actually on your print that you do not want on your print. A lot of this has to do with not having enough distance between the print head and the roller. Also, if you're using a heavier art paper, it's the same thing. The additional weight, the additional thickness of that paper can cause problems because there's not enough space between the roller and the print head. So you can change the print head height right here. And to do that, you simply click on this and come down, and you would click on this Avoid Paper Abrasion. And what that will do is it will actually put a greater distance between the print head and the roller to avoid those problems. Again, I'll show you what a print strike looks, our head strike looks like in just a second. But in our case, it's a normal paper. I'm okay with that. I don't need to worry about that. However, the last thing is this cancel margin regulation. In this case, what this has to do with is, again, in dealing with heavier weight matte papers specifically, you can run into, again, head strikes. You run into things where you'll see, we're going to look at the anomalies that happen in printing and how to fix them. But at any rate, if you are using any of those heavier weight fine art papers, you want to come into this paper detailed setting, and you would want to enable this cancel margin regulation. What that basically says is that it's going to then ignore the margins. It's not going to change the size of your print, but it changes when the print head actually lowers down and starts to then drop ink down on the paper. So at any rate, in our case though, we're not using a heavyweight matte paper or heavyweight fine art paper, so I'm going to leave that unchecked. And then finally, simply click on print, and we should be good to go. Now I'm going to cancel out of this really quickly because I want to show you how to actually then use the advanced black and white printing in here in Lightroom as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually I'm going to come back to the develop module, and I'm going to change this so that it is a black and white image. So we've got our black and white image right now. Again, if I felt like I needed to dodge or burn or tone any of this part, I would. But I'm going to just accept it. All right, I think it looks great. I'm going to come back to the print module right here, and we're going to zoom back up to the very top and go through all of our changes again to make sure that everything is correct. So again, up at the very top, the single image you do want to enable. The rotate to fit you also want to enable. Then in the print to right part down here, again under print job, you definitely want to make this to the printer. Then again, we're going to leave off draft mode. Print resolution, again, I'm going to leave that as 300 ppi. I am going to continue to do the print sharpening on this. Again, this is something that you're going to have to just set up and print it out and see if it actually works. Now, the truth of this is that there's a low and a standard and a high in here. There's also a glossy and a matte surface right here. Matte surfaces require more sharpening than glossy surfaces because the ink, the dot gain, the spread of ink that you get when ink hits the matte paper, whatever, is greater with a matte piece of paper than a glossy piece of paper. However, you can really think of this more as 6 settings in total. So if you go to glossy and you go to low, that is the least amount of sharpening you can have. Standard would be the next amount, high would be the next amount. Then you would go to matte, back to low, and this would be slightly more sharpening than the high was on the glossy paper, and then again standard and high. So those would sort of be the 6 stages that you would actually go through. In our case, this is because it is a luster paper, it's closer to a glossy, but it's moving in that luster range, so I would probably start with a standard, but it's strictly a guess. That's why I don't really like printing out of this. The sharpening thing, this is just very imprecise. Anyway, coming down to color management, we are going to change this from profile back to managed by printer. Again, what we're going to now be doing is leveraging the black and white printing software in the Epson print driver. So again, I'm going to set it up right here to say that. Again, you wouldn't want to do any contrast or brightness adjustments here. If your image needs to be changed, it needs to be changed in the develop module and then brought into here. So then again, like we just did before in the color printing, your next move is over here to page setup. You click on page setup, and this is the only place that you can actually set what page, the size of your paper. So again, I'm going to do this on a US letter sized paper. Say okay to that. And then again, you would think you hit print settings here. You don't. You come over here to printer and you click on this. And again, in this drop-down menu, you need to change this to make sure that you're using the print driver that you want to. Again, I want to be using the latest, greatest version of this, and that is the Series 3. Again, typically you're never going to see this series. You'll just get the printer name, the Canon Pro 1000. Then again, in my drop-down menu right here, from layout, come down to color matching. And now all of a sudden, these things are available to us. And the reason they are available to us is that we said right here, we want the Canon software, which is what this really is, to manage the printing, not Lightroom. So again, now I've got the option here. So to use the advanced black and white printing features of the Canon software, you need to then select this Canon color matching. So if color sync is selected, make sure that you come over here and select Canon color matching. Click on this drop-down menu. Again, come down to Quality and Media. In Quality and Media, again, you want to select the paper media that we're actually printing out to. So mine was going to be this Photo Pro Luster paper. Again, it's going to be in the top feed. It also, my print quality on this, I do want this to be high. However, now you do want to click on this black and white photo. And in black and white photo, now that we've got this part enabled, I'm going to come back up to the quality and media, and I'm going to come down to color options. And this actually opens up a screen where we can actually, essentially, it's set to print a neutral black and white right now. What this screen allows us to do is actually do black and white toning. So you'll see in the drop-down menu right here that you can actually say that you want your black and white to be slightly cooler tone. The pencils that are over here on the side, this is actually supposed to be a preview of the color that you're actually going to get. So I'm going to go back to the black and white, which is the neutralized, the normal version of it, and just watch what happens to the preview here. You'll see the shift in color. So it actually pulls some of the sort of the bluishness out of it. You can also go to a warm tone right here, which actually is moving this more towards a sort of a sepia, a warmer tone. You can see the jump probably in this preview the best between, if I go from the warm tone down to the cool tone, you'll see it changes pretty significantly. Anyway, these are canned versions of this. There is this color block over here that allows you, if you'll notice, every time I actually make a change here, this little target point right here is moving around inside of this. When it's listed as black and white, this little target point is sitting exactly in the middle. However, and when I go to say like warm tone, you'll see it moves over in one direction, cool tone moves in the opposite direction. You can click and move this thing yourself. So you'll notice if I come all the way up to the top right hand corner, it actually puts a greenish tint into my preview, and your print will, black and white print will look that way. If you come to the opposite corner, the lower left-hand corner, you'll see it puts in a sort of a magenta-y sort of tint. If I go up to the top left-hand corner, it's sort of a bluish tint. And then again, the opposite of that in the opposite lower right-hand corner is going to be sort of a yellowish tint. So you can pick any of these that you want to. You can pick and choose this stuff. In most cases, it probably makes sense if you want to just experiment with this and see what it looks like. Try sort of like a warmer tone. If you do your printout and you find out that you wish it to be even warmer still, you can simply click on this and start to drag it even further, do another print and see how it looks. If, on the other hand, you think that the warm tone was too warm, you can actually start to click and drag it back to neutralize it even more. You'll see that there's an XY axis right here. All this is again, if I go back to black and white, it just means these are 0, 0 numbers. If I go straight up, that's actually the Y axis. If I go straight down, it's also Y axis. If I go left to right, it's the X axis. So anyway, that's all these readouts are. But at any rate, I'm going to go back to black and white right there. And then again, this is now actually ready to go. The last thing before we actually hit print though is again, check your paper detailed settings. Again, if this is a heavyweight fine art paper, you might need to increase the head height between the roller and the print head. That would be avoid paper abrasion setting right here. And also, if this is going to be a fine art matte paper, heavyweight one, whatever, you would probably want to enable this cancel margin regulation. So anyway, and then when this is actually now set up correct to do, and then simply hit the print button, and you will be good to go. Okay, one last thing I want to look at before we go any further are the problems that you can run into, the troubleshooting that we need to ultimately do on this. So I'm going to jump out of this really quickly. I'm going to go back to our little slideshow presentation, and I'm going to come down to this. So this is the first thing that we're actually going to look at right here, and this, again, you'll see this. This is actually this is what it looks like on a print. This is actually, if you can tell, this is a print that's actually sitting on a desktop, and you'll see the edge of this. There's a lot of black ink that's hit this. There's anyway, this is actually a serious problem that we've got here. And this is actually called a head strike, and what's happening here is that the paper in most cases is actually too thick for the gap that's between the print rollers and the print head. And you remember when I was showing you guys how to fix that part, again, if we go to this paper detailed setting, you would click on this print head adjustment. If you, again, could take this from the default up to avoid print paper abrasion, that will increase the gap between the print head and the roller. If you are still getting those, so let me jump back into this really quick. If you're still getting those, that is an indication that you need to use the manual feed. The manual feed, again, is at the bottom of the rear of the print of the Canon printer, and it accommodates thicker, heavier media, such as a really seriously thick, heavy fine art paper. So that would actually be what would that would be the first thing that you would attempt in this. The other thing that can cause these strikes, there's two other things that actually can cause these head strikes. One of them is that the paper is actually curled. So you've taken the paper out of your box, there's enough humidity in the air, whatever. For some reason, the edges of the paper are beginning to curl. So the edge of the paper is sitting slightly up. So as the head comes across it, it hits against this edge of the paper and it leaves that ink stain on there. So to fix that problem, you actually need to put your paper under weight. So you would put a whole bunch of books or something, something heavy on top of your paper, leave it there for a couple of hours to actually press it flat to try to get rid of this. And then the final thing that can actually happen in this, or the thing that can cause this, is when you're printing double-sided pieces of paper. So on double-sided pieces of paper, what a lot of people will do is they'll run the paper through side A, the first side, and then immediately turn around. Even though the ink feels dry on the piece of paper, they'll flip it around and then they'll run it through a second, and they'll run it through to print the back side of it. The truth of the matter is that the ink has not dried. If you are doing double-sided printing, it is in your serious advantage to print one side, let those prints dry overnight before you print the reverse side. It will save you a lot of money and a lot of heartache and a lot of headache. There's another thing that's actually caused by this, another problem that we're going to run into that comes from doing double-sided printing that we're going to look at in just a second. But at any rate, the solution for this then is to increase the gap between the print head and the roller, and to also make sure that your media is completely flat, and then also to make sure if you are doing double-sided printing that you have let the first side dry overnight. So the second problem that we're going to look at is roller marks, and these are roller marks right here. This is what they look like. You can see there's sort of a little black line that's going through here. You'll pick this part up here. There's other marks that you'll actually see right here. What roller marks are coming from is the roller itself has gotten dirty. So again, the roller is what is underneath your printer that moves the print paper through the printer, and then the head is actually on the other side of the piece of paper laying down ink. What this is, the reason you're getting this is that the rollers themselves are actually dirty. So to fix that, there is actually a cleaning routine that exists inside of the Canon printer itself. So again, if you're seeing these things, the first thing you do is actually, again, go back to your home screen, click on your home screen to get back to this part, then use the up and down arrow keys to navigate to maintenance and click OK. Inside of maintenance, this will take you to maintenance, click OK. Inside of this, you'll see that one of your options in maintenance is roller cleaning right here. You would use the arrow keys to navigate down to roller cleaning, and you would actually click on OK and run the roller cleaning routine. And that will actually take care of the dirty roller parts. But again, one of the things that will re-dirty this roller immediately, a lot of this comes from people who, again, are doing double-sided printing and they're not waiting long enough for the ink on the first face of the print to dry. So they run a print through the printer, they flip it over to print the back side of it, the ink is not dried, these rollers then pick up that ink, and then when you go to do your next print, it puts the ink right back onto your print. So this is primarily, not exclusively, but primarily a consequence of people who are not allowing their double-sided prints to dry overnight. And then the final thing that we've actually got here is banding, and you'll actually see it. It looks like stripes that are running through here. Sometimes you actually get much more discrete ones. They can be in any color. They can be black. They can be white. They can be a color. All of this is an indication that your nozzle has clogged, and you need to do a nozzle check and a cleaning, which is how we started this very first, the very first part of this video. So if you see these things happening, you simply come back and run, again, this is actually acting as a nozzle check for you. This is telling you that you need to clean your nozzles. So you would go through the nozzle cleaning routine that we had at the very beginning of this video. And that's it.